All right, welcome to Tap Integration, the Integration Chronicles. We are on a mission here to define what integration means as it pertains to self-actualization, and then converting that definition into accessible and actionable tools for anybody at any stage of their transformation. And my favorite part is that we are here to empower facilitators to thrive and to amplify their gifts. So, again, we are here to amplify the facilitation tools and gifts that Wally has. He is one of my favorite facilitators. He has such a wealth of knowledge and wisdom as it pertains to all things sort of like spiritual realm, metaphysical, understanding the things that we can't see with our physical eyes that have been sort of predestined. But I don't want to get too far into it. So I'm going to let Wally introduce himself. Welcome, Wally. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited for this.
Yahoo! Okay, so looking back, what were the pivotal moments that led you into facilitation work? What was
Wow.
life like before you took that leap?
It's so funny because once you like take that leap and you look back and you change so much, it almost feels like you're talking about a different person. Like, so even for me to recap is kind of like I have to kind of tap into what it felt like back then a little bit. And I am no stranger of transformation. Basic synopsis of my younger life. I grew up in Catholic school, a very creative, free thinking type of spirit, which really didn't go over well with the nuns. And so I was always in trouble. I was kind of like just not interested in scholastics. I barely passed high school. I got into college because I test high. So anyway, I had no direction because I went off to college, like basically just kind of like doing what I'm supposed to do, right? And during that time, I also was the heaviest person that anyone knew. I almost got up to 400 pounds during that time. And during that time, I never touched a drug before college. And by the time I was done with 4 years of at Arizona State, I was, doing all types of drugs. Just was basically a druggy flunk out and I had no direction in my life. So at that point, I made a distinct choice to make a change. I remember the moment, the very moment. It was a conversation that my cousin had with me about knowing me my whole life. And I've always been this big fat person that everyone loves, but like I was like the class clown and got along with all types of people. Definitely a people pleaser, which is part of my story. But he's like, like you're popular, and don't you want to know what life would be like to like if you weren't like really fat? And that conversation like pissed me off because we were at the pool when it happened. I had like no shirt on, so I was all vulnerable, like almost naked. And I remember going inside and I made a decision right there, right? And from then on, a year and a half later, I weighed 180 pounds. I got accepted into a new college. I graduated magna cum laude of that college with a degree in sculpture and painting. I traveled abroad and I kind of flipped the script. So the reason why I'm starting there is I had a pivot point, a crossroad in my life in which I chose a certain direction and maintained to have a lot of success until the no longer drug addiction, but more of alcoholism with some drugs, but not the drugs I was doing at Arizona State, led me to ending up in the hospital 4 times in 1 year, and I almost died. It was a near death experience. The doctors said I was very lucky to survive it, and I put myself into recovery at that point. And I would say that like up to that point in my life, I'd always like made it. If I like went down a certain road and made a decision to change, I was like able to do it. Like I had that past experience, but in this case with the addiction, I was not able to do it alone. So that was a real like kind of pivot, a changing point in my life. Like understanding that it's kind of everyone. I think it's in our blueprint that we're all designed to get to the point on our journey where we need to ask for help. In fact, that's the most loving thing anyone can do is ask for help.
Hmm, so beautiful. There's a couple things that stuck out to me. I'm curious first how, well, so it seems like you were connected to the self-regulation tool of food previously. That seemed to have been the primary way that you would maybe regulate or self-soothe. It's kind of how I see a lot of these like adaptive strategies that we get. And a lot of our adaptive strategies we get from our parents, this genetic coding, tools that we see them using to regulate themselves, and we adapt them or adopt them. And so it sounds like it was food. You had this pivotal moment, which came from a guy triggering you basically with
Oh
what he
yeah.
said. And that trigger turned into it charging you up. So it kind of fueled you with this anger. What is that right?
Absolutely. It was a big, like middle finger, right? For sure. Like, oh, you don't think I can? Well, let me show you. And I would say that that was a fuel that drove me. And even like when I worked out, I would listen to like really hard, angry music. That was like, and I still actually do tap into that still. Um, but a lot of the like, let me show you as I've gotten older, like that's changed a lot. That's no longer who I am in that way. So, but I remember like almost enjoying it, like feeling like that lights a fire in me when people doubt me or think I can or just like don't see me for what I am, like just like I'll show you type of mentality.
So it was the fuel that you needed. It was the only fuel accessible to you at the time, was that anger, that I'll show you. Um, and that led you to make this big transformation in your life, which was shifting out of maybe using food as that adaptive strategy to regulate, and then you shifted out. And then it sounds like your life really started to change. However, is it possible that you then shifted to another regulation tool, which was then the alcohol, and then that
Well,
became,
even the success, like I became addicted to working out, right? Like, and I like what, like the way my brain works, well, when I get into something, it's kind of an obsession where I get really center focused, and people say, and I agree that addictions are a distraction, right? In some way, it's a coping mechanism, but it also is something that feeds into being in a flow state for me. It's actually the same neurological pathways for addiction and flow state. So yes, but then later on in life, it became. And by the way, with the alcohol, even at the time, I was working in a restaurant while drinking and being the top guy there and like succeeding. Like I even correlated it with my success, like where I felt like it was helping me to be loose and my authentic self on the stage that I'm performing for people. That was the belief system. So ultimately, this whole stuff about the substance, the food, it's more about my relationship with the food, my relationship with the drugs, my relationship with the alcohol. And that's what I came to see in this whole process. There's no bad substance, it's more of the relationship with it.
100%. Okay, so let's fast forward. You ended up getting sober. How did that then lead you to facilitation work?
Well, yeah, that really was my gateway. So I did AA. Like that's what I did. I put myself into a halfway house where people who were trying to avoid jail went into. Like I slept with bed bugs and with criminals, but that's what I needed. It was in that process where I finally was able to get certified as a personal trainer and nutritionist in that time because I always talked about doing that. That's what alcoholics do. They go to the bar and they talk about what they're going to do, right? So I finally had the space in my life to do that. And again, got really obsessed with that. And I turned the community of AA into like I replaced it with the gym. because I figured out like the AA people, like I love them, but I'm not the donut guy. I'm not the cigarette guy. I'm not the gray cup of coffee guy pouring out my feelings with a bunch of hard men. Like that just wasn't me. I'm a very feminine natured person, and I had the perfect segue where I was like spending all my time helping people, especially with the weight loss. I had like a personal experience there that just connected with people. I was also the oldest person who worked there by like 15 years, and I'm the new guy, right? So I just by default got all the elderly people like I came in. And two things I learned. Number one, a person who's elderly, who's looking for, personal training cannot get through a session in a half hour. So I billed them for a half hour, but each session was an hour. Number two, what they really, really needed more than anything else was someone to talk to. And in that experience, it became aware to me that, oh, I'm here to actually do something more than just this physical stuff. And I and then just started like a journey of personal exploration, like where I wanted to see my health and wellness career blossom. And I ended up moving away from Ohio where I got sober. So grateful I grew up there. It was really, really close to the OG AA community where it all started. So I got really strong recovery. But I knew a long time ago, I knew as a kid that I was not going to spend the rest of my life in Ohio. That's why I moved away when I was 17 and spent 3 years in Ohio, moved back to Seattle where I had lived before, and got fortunate enough to make really great money in a restaurant that allowed me to invest in my education. And I got certified as a Being True to You coach after I met Dr. Dan Engel at a health and wellness retreat.
And for those
And
who don't know what that is, it's a integration coaching certification for people coming or going through a psychedelic transformation.
that experience also catalyzed, like when I was younger, I had a series of meaningful coincidences that all happened in a short period of time that was incredible. And then in my stepping away at that crossroad that I came to that I talked about earlier, I got away from that. And as soon as, like, the first thing that happened at where I met Dr. Dan was he had me check out the Being True to You program. What happened to be like a really meaningful coincidence was the person who designed it, Deanne Adamson, is someone who I worked with for 5 years in a restaurant like 15 years ago. And I know her
Mm.
well, I know her sister well, and that just kind of was the first of, we could spend 2 hours talking about the meaningful coincidences that have happened then, but that's literally been the path I've been following since.
Wow, beautiful. So I definitely want to get into your facilitation and integration tool of Gene Keys, but before we go there, I want to ask you what is one powerful integration tool or tip that you can give someone who maybe has a pattern of addiction or using substances as a regulation tool or adaptive strategy? Maybe they've gone through a psychedelic experience and now they're integrating, they're turning their awareness online and starting to understand themselves. How would you help them to integrate that experience with the understanding of their relationship to
Awesome
substances?
question. Number one would be as I mentioned before, it's a requirement that we ask for help. So like literally get in a practice of doing that. Because most people that I've met that are in addiction recovery, most of them are people pleasers. So they have no problem helping other people, but they have a problem receiving help. Right. So that seems to be like such a big obstacle. And the other thing is, and I mentioned this about the like following the breadcrumb trail of synergies. I'll just share a really short story. The second time, my medicine that I connect with the most is 5-MeO DMT. I've had like two just amazing experiences with that. I've only done it twice. The second time I did it, what happened was I brought the integration tools from the first experience, and it was all about sacred geometry. I started using a sacred geometry oracle deck, and just as fun. And it ended up being such an amazing tool for me for integration to create this connection, this way of connecting with my higher self, because that's all the oracle deck is. Like the tarot, all the archetypes are just different aspects of our psyche that we all have relationships with. So all my stuff I brought in this box had to do with sacred geometry. I and like everything that I was integrating from my first experience. Well, out of that box during the middle of the ceremony, a spider crawled out of the box and sat at my heart the entire time for the ceremony. Okay? So when I got out of it, the people told me they actually filmed it and they, apologized. They're like, listen, we don't film people unless we know, but you just had to see this, right? So we're like, okay, I guess the spider is like my guide for this integration. And we looked up immediately the significance of a spider, and the first thing that came up was sacred geometry, which has to do with the spider web. So that was just like one of the, like, of course. So the spider became my teacher for the next several years, and it took me to my dark night of the soul for sure. But it also taught me the the essence of spider energy. And by the way, I ended up meeting a Lakota elder who wears grandma spider around her neck. I ended up going to Mexico. I really got deep into spider medicine for the next few years. But the ultimate integration perspective I can offer is the spider has a plan. It has this execution of precision that maps out everything perfectly. But after it creates its web, it no longer hunts, it receives. So this really is a powerful way, an aspect for me to look at what the harmonization of masculine and feminine energy, but also how my mind is important, right? But it doesn't like create the whole experience. It's about letting go and receiving too. So for me, it became not only about spiders, about all animals. And in fact, in the next time I smoked 5-MeO DMT, it was a dragonfly that landed on my heart, and the dragonfly led me to the gene keys.
Wow. Super cool. Okay, and so I'll let you describe briefly what the Gene Keys is. We have about 10 minutes left, but first I want to say that Wally just did a Gene Key reading for me, and it was so validating. It really clarified my path, the path of my life's purpose on earth. Also what tools and resources that I need to lean into to really hone those gifts and to continue to stay on the path, to watch what my out for what my shadow stuff looks like when I'm in my not self, and what it looks like when I am operating from self. So very powerful. And at the end of this, we'll give you the all of Wally's information in case you want to book a session with him.
Awesome. Thank you. So just to give you a little experience of like my own personal gene key reading, because it kind of says everything. Um, the gene key reading I did for Olivia and what I'm talking about now, it actually has like the four direction points of the medicine wheel. Like, and I mixed the gene keys readings with Lakota wisdom. I mixed it with sacred geometry. I use light language. By the way, sacred geometry is light language as well. That's another name for sacred geometry. I use these numeric codes, and I also offer the shamanic perspective of a plant, an animal, and a crystal that embodies the essence of the harmonization. My readings, they're actually called quantum harmonic readings. And the gene keys is just a way into it. I really don't go deep into the gene key aspect of it because Richard Rudd, he created it. He is a poet who writes a book of science. And one of my gene keys is about that. It's about the marriage of science and spirituality. That's like the essence of my reading. And so the shadow of that is psychosis and and the city, which is the most exalted state or the superpower, is mastery. Okay. And the whole point of it is this it's funny because it comes up so much in my life. And it's so valuable for me, even in this conversation, to lean into it a little. is that mastery is finding genius in the simplicity of things, not the complexity.
Mm.
And I'll just kind of give an example of like how that works. So a big tool for me in the whole process is really leaning into the geometry of language as well and unpacking words. That's called etymology. And so for me, I look at I take a word, and rather than explaining the whole concept of why the perspective of this and the shift is, blah blah blah, giving all the understanding behind it. And I'll just do this with Olivia right now. Think of the word responsibility and what that means to you. And if you want to give like a little feedback, like responsibility, like what is that to you?
Responsibility to me is power. A lot of times we hear the saying, with great power comes great responsibility, but it also works in reverse. I think when the more responsibility we take, the more ownership we take, the more power we have.
I love it. I love it. Now, take that concept and I'm going to raise it up a little to a higher perspective because that's what in sacred geometry, an angel, which has higher perspective, is an angle. It's the same word, it's the same etymology. It's not archangel, it's archangle. It's the same thing. So I'm going to change the word and say response agility. Now, what does that embody now for you?
Hmm. To me, it implies the ability to be able to weave through situations and to actually have control over your response as opposed to being reactive.
I love it. It ushers in your own life experiences, right? Because so much of being in our head is about concepts that we agree with, but the only knowing is knowing of thyself, and that is through experience in a body. So that's ultimately the goal of my readings is to help people get out of their head and get into their experiential self, ultimately to get into the heart space where that is the neutralizing factor because we live in this duality reality because that's where experiences happen. And so, really looking at that because the gene keys, the 4 points I do on the first reading is going to be your life's work, which is more of like what your soul has chosen to be here for. Okay. Next part is your evolution. Now, evolution is your school. These are where you're learning. So this is going to be a lot of your challenges, a lot of your patterns, right? And by you going through these experiences again and again and again and learning, you get to your radiance. Now, your radiance is what keeps you healthy and happy. So that's the third aspect of it. And the final one is your purpose. So your purpose is kind of like weaving it all together. And this is you as like the serpent slithering on the ground with all that knowledge. Where like the other one, the life's work is more of the eagle that has perspective of the divine perspective. So one is more oriented to the heavens, one is more integrated to your life in a body. And it's really about looking at the evolution, your challenges, as something that divinity chose for you. In fact, you participated. You actually are the creator that created these challenges for so you can have experiences where you can radiate from. And a good example of that would be like in mine. I'll give you my example. So for me, my radiance, uh, the shadow of it is failure, right? And so as much as I feel like I'm here to inspire people with my wisdom and everything, what actually inspires people more is when I fail and I learn from it. So in other words, in the hero's journey, no one's interested in hearing about the story about the person that had a perfect life with like just all their successes. Who can relate to that? We want to hear about the person who gets back up, right, and meets these challenges and learns and grows. So it's ultimately helping people understand. And this is what integration to me is all about. It's about transformation. We are in a body so that we can transform in this dense experience, right? And the first entry point of transformation is being the victim, where we see as life happening to us, right? Now, there's 4 steps of transformation. Most people skip the second step. The second step is the participant, where you just say perhaps or what if. Okay, this is where we get to use our imagination, which is our superpower. Our mind is here to imagine. It is literally from another dimension. Everything we can imagine exists in another dimension, and we condense it down into our dense reality and materialize it. So the third aspect would be the student. So the student is going to learn from the evolution to create their radiance, which impacts people because you shine. When you shine, you're a star and you're enlightening people. And the fourth aspect would be the creator or the alchemist. It's the same thing. It's like you designed this game so that you can go through this process. And once like people understand that and they can see how they've already done that, you're already doing it. Everyone's already doing it, right? Once they get there and they actually like experience that, then it becomes fun. It all becomes fun, and that's what I'm here to help people attune to the I see the whole everything as a musical instrument. Everything is music. We're all in octaves of experience. It's a spectrum. It's all the same thing. And the gene key readings are just oriented towards helping people understand the shape of their instrument. And I'm just teaching people how to attune it. And attuning it is a vibration. So laughter is one of the ways we attune. It makes the body vibrate. So does shivering. And that's why a lot of the integration that I do, it happens to do with the ice plunge. So, and
Mm.
there's many other different ways of vibrating your body to get to a different frequency. So that's what the quantum harmonic readings are about, is about just like literally getting out of the self-help stuff. And, as a coach for years, like I know all the right answers, right? But when you share that with someone, you're robbing them of that experience now. And every coach has done that. And we've all had to learn that lesson, like not to do that, right? So I'm just helping people understand the the nature of the game and how they can engage it. And then they just have their own experience. And my job is to just offer the reflection back, which is the what if. It's just a different perspective.
Yes. Awesome. Incredible. What special offering can you offer to our Tap Integration readers, listeners, the people that find you through our community?
Wow. Well, anyone, so like my readings are usually $111 for a reading. It's a $90 reading. So anyone,
A
I
90
have this,
minute, 90
what's
minute,
that?
a
It's
90
90
minute.
minutes.
Okay.
90-minute reading. Yeah, it ends up, it can go longer. It can go as short as an hour if no, they just like are just listening to me, which I don't really like because it's it's a reflective experience. It could go anywhere. I really don't have a plan. And in fact, I invite people to interrupt me and to talk about whatever they want to talk about. I really don't like in the in the coaching arena where people cut people off and say, "Don't get in the story," and like this is them attuning their instrument. If they need to play their music, let them go, yo. Like so, it's taken up to 3 hours before, but it averages out to be 90 minutes. Okay,
Okay.
I just allow to go where, and so I have this thing with the number 11, and I can explain that another time, but it has to do with the harmonics and also the number 52, which is the age that elders step into. So I'm going to do it instead for 111, 52 for that reading.
Amazing. Wow, guys, that's a super good deal.
Yeah.
Please, if you are interested in the Gene Keys, understanding your life's purpose, understanding what it looks like when you're operating from your not self and in the shadow, and how to integrate that to become a superpower for yourself, I recommend you to reach out to Wally, book a session. and use the gene keys and the tools that he gives you to really integrate the insights and transformation as it's coming through for you. Wally, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview with me and for sharing all of your wisdom. I hope we can do it again sometime.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime.
Awesome. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.